Welcome to the San Francisco Bay Area segment of Bhagavan's 72nd Aradhana celebration online. We will start with Ramana Maharshi written by one of the Bay Area devotees, Sri Satya Narayanan.
Sundaramurti Nayanar, one of the foremost of the 64 Nayanmars, a Shiva devotee, sang his first Padigam, a set of 10 verses on Lord Shiva, in the town Tiruvennallur. He addressed Shiva as Pitta, that is, a lunatic, in the first verse, which is the first name Sundarar called him prior to when Lord Shiva came as an old man to claim Sundarar as his slave. Having realized that Lord Shiva, in his infinite compassion, stopped Sundarar from falling into worldly life, and thereby awakened him to lead a devotee's life, Sundarar proclaims with certainty in each verse that I am indeed your slave. Arguing otherwise is not possible. Inspired by Sundarar's Padigam, in the following 10 verses of Sri Ramana Maharshi, the devotee proclaims that the devotee belongs to Guru Ramana, who resides in the grace-filled Sonachala and will not go to anyone else. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
சிற்றகந்தை கைப்பாவை என்னை காத்தாழ பாலை மேல் கவிழ்ந்தீர பொழிவாய் ஈத்தாயனை தன் பாசனை நல்லோரர் கணனுள் தீத்தாவுட காளாயினி செல்லே பிறபாலே எண்ணாநிலை எய்தாதலை பாயும் மனமூலம் அண்ணாமலை நடித்தாடும் மகனோ கிடமீப்பாய் அண்ணாயனி தன் பாசனை நல்லோரர் பதத்துள் தின்னாவுன காளாயினி செல்லே பிறபாலே எரியாத அஞ்ஞான திரையிட்ட விரதி சரியான மெய்ஞான கேள்வி தீட்டாய் சரியாதனை தன் பாசனை நல்லோரர் புலத்துள் துளியாவுன காளாயினி செல்லே பிறபாலே இருந்தேயன புறமூறி விதவிதமாயுண்டு இருந்தேனை பிணியேதென்றறிவித்தாய் பிணிக்கு திருந்தாயனை தன் பாசனை நல்லோரர் புறையுள் மறந்தே உனக்காடாயினி செல்லே பிறப்பாலே துழவே என் வழியோவென துடித்தேனை தடுத்து புறம்பேத வலைவா வாழ்ந்தும் பரம் காணென்றார்த்த உறவாய் என்னை தன் பாசொனை நல்லூரர் புறத்தொழு துறவே உனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலே ஈசானினை ஓராயிரம் கேள்விகளால் துளைத்தே பேசாதிரு நான் யாரை தேடென்றே அடக்கும் நேசாவென்னை தன் பாசொனை நல்லூரர் படியுள் ஆசானுனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலே ஆசானுனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலே பூமீது யானேற்றும் பேரகந்தை போக்கி நானான் என்றாடும் வேறான்ம பொருநோக்க யாழ்நாய் தென்னி தன் பாசனை நல்லூரர் கடவுள் வான்போ உனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலை குறைவாயனை நினையாவிலை மறைவாய் ஒளிரிருப்பே நிறைவாய் அறி நிஜமேதன மறைவாக்கினை முறையாய் அறைவாயனை தன் பாசனை நல்லூரர் பரத்துள் இறைவா உனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலே யமநாடு ஏகும் உன் இணை நாட பணிக்கே உமைநாதன் வார்மலையாய் உரை மையம் உரைக்கே எமையாள் என்னை தன் பாசொனை நல்லூரர் கவினுள் ரமணா உனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலே ரமணா உனக்காடாய் இனி செல்லேன் பிறப்பாலே.
Thiruvadara Kali or Kaikoti Kali is a ritual dance performed by women in Kerala on Arudra Darshanam Day. Here, the Bay Area devotees present this dance form set to Bhagavan's Malayalam Upadeshasaram. After composing Upadeshasaram in Tamil, Bhagavan composed its Malayalam version at the request of devotees from Kerala. This became part of the 15-day Tamil Parayanam routine. Upadeshasaram is followed by Bhagavan's Ekatma Panchakam, translated into Malayalam in Vanjipattu meter by a devotee named Narayanan. Bhagavan has copied this into Tamil script.
கர்மம் பலத்தினே தன்னு வருന്നതും கர்த்தாவு தன்னுடைய ஆജ്ഞ തന്നാൽ കർമ്മമദൈവമാകുന്നതും എങ്ങനെ കർമ്മമചേതനമാകൊണ്ട് കർമ്മഫലങ്ങളോ നശ്വരം വാസനാകാരവിത്തായത് കൂടക്കൂടെ കർമ്മസമുദ്രത്തിൽ ചാടിക്കുമല്ലാതെ ഗതിയിനെ എന്നുമേ കാണിക്കില്ല ഈശ്വര പ്രീതിയിനായി ഫലമേൽപ്പിച്ചോരിച്ഛയന്നിച്ഛൈ നിഷ്കാമ്യ കർമ്മം ആശയ ശുദ്ധി വരുത്തിയ മുക്തിയിനായുള്ള മാർഗത്തിൽ ചേർക്കുമോർക്ക കായികം വാചികം മാനസികമെന്ന് കർമ്മങ്ങൾ മൂന്ന് തരത്തിലത്രേ ആരവ പൂജ ജപം ധ്യാനമീ ക്രമത്താമൂന്നു മുന്നിലോനേറ്റമോർത്താൽ അഷ്ടമൂർത്തങ്ങളെ കാണുന്ന ലോകമിതാകവേ ഈശ്വരകാരമക ദൃഷ്ടിയിൽ കൊണ്ട് സേവിക്കുക തക്കപോൽ ദേവനു ചെയ്യും വിശേഷ പൂജ ഉത്തമ സ്തോത്രത്തെക്കാൾ ജപമാജപത്തുച്ഛത്തെക്കാളും ഉപാംശുവേക്കാൾ ചിത്തജപം തന്നെ ശ്രേഷ്ഠമാകുന്നതാ ചിത്തജപത്തന്യമല്ല ധ്യാനം വിട്ടുചെയ്വിച്ചിന്ന ധ്യാനത്തിനേക്കാളും വിടാതെ നിതാര പോലാറ് പോലെ ഒട്ടുമേ വിത്തിട സന്തത ധ്യാനമേ ഉത്തമമെത്രയും ശക്തി കൂടും ഭിന്നൻ ഞാൻ ഈശ്വരൻ തന്നെക്കാൾ എന്നുള്ള ഭേദഭാവത്തെക്കാൾ ശോകമെന്നും അന്യനല്ലെന്നവ ഭേദഭാവം തന്നെ അത്യന്തമുത്കൃഷ്ടമായ ഭാവം ഭാവബലം കൊണ്ട് ഭാവം കടന്ന സദ്ഭാവത്തിങ്കൽ നിലനിൽക്ക തന്നെ ഭാവന ഭക്തിയെക്കാളതി ഭാവന ഭക്തി പരാഭക്തി മുക്തി നൽകും മർമ്മമായുള്ളതൻ ജന്മസ്ഥലത്തെത്തി മാനസം സ്വസ്ഥമായുള്ളതല്ലോ കർമ്മവും ഭക്തിയും യോഗവും ജ്ഞാനവും കാണുകെല്ലാവற்றிൽ കണ്ട സാരം വായുവിനെ ഉൾപ്പ ദുഃഖമറിക്കുകിൽ വലയകം പെട്ടുള്ള പക്ഷി പോലെ പായുമ മാനസം പെട്ടിടും കെട്ടിങ്കൽ പ്രാണനെ പത്തലുപായമാണ് മാനസം ജ്ഞാനശക്തി പ്രാണനോ ക്രിയ മാത്രമാം ശക്തി കലർന്നതാകും മാനസം പ്രാണനി രണ്ടുമേ ശാഖകൾ മற்றവற்றிൻ മൂലശക്തിയൊന്ന് ലയവും വിനാശവും രണ്ടാനോടുക്കവും ലയവും അപ്പോഴത്തതാകയാലേ ലയിച്ചുള്ളതോ വീണ്ടും പൊന്തി വരും രൂപം നശിച്ചതെന്നെന്നും മടങ്ങുകയില്ല കെട്ടിപ്പിടിച്ചകം വെച്ചതാൽ പ്രാണനെ കെട്ടിൽപ്പെട്ടുള്ള അച്ചിത്തം തന്നെ വിട്ടയച്ചോർ വഴി കാട്ടി തന്നിടുക നഷ്ടമാനസം താനെ തന്നെ മനസ്സിന്റെ രൂപം മരിച്ചു വേഷത്താലെ മനുഷ്യനെ കാണും മഹാത്മയോഗി തനിക്കൊരു കാര്യവും ചെയ്യേണ്ടതായില്ല തന്നിജ രൂപം പ്രാപിച്ചതാലേ പുറവിഷയങ്ങളിൽ പോകാതെ ചിത്തത്തിൻ പോക്കിനെ ഉന്മുഖമാക്കി തന്റെ അറിവായ രൂപത്തെ താനറിയുന്നതേ അറിവാകും സത്യമകത്തിൽ കൊള്ളുക മനസ്സിനു രൂപമേതാണെന്നെല്ലായ്പ്പോഴും മറവാതാകത്തിൽ നിറഞ്ഞുവെന്നാൽ മനസ്സെന്നൊന്നുമേ കാണുമാറില്ല ഹേ മാർഗമിതാർക്കും നേരായ മാർഗം എണ്ണങ്ങളെ കൂടാതെ മനമേയില്ല എണ്ണങ്ങളെ മനമെന്നു ചൊല്ലും എണ്ണങ്ങൾക്കെല്ലാമേ മൂലം ഞാൻ എന്നുള്ള എണ്ണമാകും മനമെന്നാൽ ഞാൻ എന്നതെങ്ങുന്നു തോന്നുന്നുവെന്നു മനസ്സുള്ളിൽ മൂടി അന്വേഷിച്ചിടിൽ ഞാൻ തല കുത്തിപ്പതിക്കുമിതല്ലയോ ജ്ഞാന വിചാരം വേറൊന്നുമല്ല ഞാനോടും മുന്ന സ്വസ്ഥാനമാകൃത്തിങ്കൽ ഞാനെന്നുന്നത് താനായി തോന്നും താനാകത്തോന്നുന്നതിന്നല്ല ഇല്ലല്ലോ താനായതും പരിപൂർണം തന്നെ ഞാൻ എന്നതിനർത്ഥമാണിതു നിത്യവും ഞാൻ ലയിച്ചുള്ള ഉറക്കത്തിങ്കൽ താനില്ലാതായെന്നതില്ലാതെല്ലാവർക്കും താനുണ്ടെന്നുള്ള ഉണർച്ച തന്നാൽ ദേഹവും ജ്ഞാന കർമ്മേന്ദ്രിയം പ്രാണനും ധീരുട്ടും ദൃശ്യലോകമെല്ലാം മോഹമസജ്ജടമാകയാൽ ഞാനല്ല മുക്കാലത്തുള്ള സത്തല്ലയോ ഞാൻ ഉള്ളതുണർത്തുവാൻ തന്നെ കളഞ്ഞമായുള്ള ഉണർവൊന്നും കാണുന്നില്ല ഉള്ളത് തന്നെ ഉണർവുമാകുന്നതും ഉള്ള ഞാൻ തന്നെ ഉണർവുമല്ലേ ഇരിക്കും സ്വഭാവത്താൽ ഈശ്വര ജീവകൾ ഇരുവരും ഏകാത്മവസ്തു തന്നെ ഒരിക്കലും ഭേദമുരക്കരുതായവർ ഉപാധിയും ബോധവും തന്നെ ഭിന്നം തന്നോടെ ഭേദവുപാധികളെ വിട്ട് തന്നെ താൻ കാണുക തന്നെ ഈശൻ തന്നോടെ വാസ്തവ ദർശനം ഈശ്വരൻ താനായി പ്രകാശിക്കൊണ്ട് തന്നെ താനായിരിക്കും ഇരിപ്പിനെ തന്നെ മുൻ തന്നെത്താൻ കാണുക എന്നു ചൊല്ലി താനെന്നും ഒന്ന് തന്നെയല്ലാതെ രണ്ടോ തന്മയനിഷ്ഠ ഇതെന്നു കണ്ട് അറിവറിയാമയും ഇല്ലാതെയുള്ള നല്ലറിവിതു തന്നെ യഥാർത്ഥ ജ്ഞാനം അറിവാനിതിന്മീതെയുള്ളതൊന്നേതാണ് അറിവതിൽ അന്യമായൊന്നുമില്ല എന്താണ് തന്നുടെ രൂപമെന്നീ വഴി തന്നെ തമ്മിൽ താനും ഒന്ന് കണ്ടാൽ അന്തവും ആദിയും ഇല്ലാതെ തോന്നിടും അഖണ്ഡ ചിദാനന്ദ വസ്തു ഒന്നേ ബന്ധവും മുക്തിയും രണ്ടും കടന്നുള്ള ബ്രഹ്മ മഹാനന്ദമെന്തു ചൊല്ലാം സ്വന്തമായങ്ങനെ സന്തതം നിൽപ്പവർ ശുദ്ധര ദൈവിക സച്ചരിത്ര ജ്ഞാനത്തിൽ തോന്നുന്നതേതൊന്നാണെന്നു ജ്ഞാനത്തിനത് തന്നെ പറ്റി താനിരിക്കുന്നത് തന്നെയല്ലോ നല്ല തപസ്സെന്നു മാരമണൻ പറഞ്ഞു സന്തോഷമോടുപദേശ സാരം കൊണ്ട് സന്നിഷ്ഠനായി കുമ്മി കൊട്ട് കൊട്ട് സന്താപശാന്തിയും സന്തതാനന്ദവും സന്ധിക്കുമില്ലിതിൽ ശങ്കയൊട്ടും ഒട്ടുമേ കഷ്ടങ്ങൾ ഒട്ടാതെ വിട്ടിടാൻ ഉപദേശ സാരത്തെ കൊണ്ടുകൂടി കൊട്ടുവിനൻപர்கள் എല്ലാവരും കുമ്മി കൊട്ടുവിനാനന്ദം കിട്ടുവാനായി കുമ്മി കൊട്ടുവിനാനന്ദം കിട്ടുവാനായി കുമ്മി കൊട്ടുവിനാനന്ദം കിട്ടുവാനായി ആത്മസ്വരൂപമാം തന്നെ മരന്നിഹ ശരീരത്തെ ആത്മാവെന്നു ധരിച്ചെണ്ണമില്ലാതെ ജന്മം എടുത്തലഞ്ഞൊടുവിൽ തൻ സ്വരൂപത്തിൽ ഉണർന്നതായി ലസിപ്പത് പാത്തിടുകിൽ ധരയിലെങ്ങും തെണ്ടിത്തിരിയുന്നതായി കണ്ടകിനാവു വിട്ടുണർന്നിണ്ടലേതും കൂടാതിരിപ്പത് പോലെയാ ആത്മാവായി താനിരിക്കവേ താനാരെന്നും താനെങ്ങെന്നും കേൾപ്പദേവൻ അവൻ മദ്യപാനം ചെയ്തിക ഞാനാരെന്നും ഞാനെങ്ങെന്നും അസംബന്ധം പൂലം വീടും മദ്യപാനിക്കു തന്നെ സമാനമാകും ഉടലാത്മാവിനുള്ളിലെ ഇരിക്കവേ ആത്മാവിന് ജഡമാകും ഉടൽക്കുള്ളായി കരുതും മദ്യൻ ചിത്രത്തിനാധാരമായി തത്ര സ്ഥിതി ചെയ്തിടുന്ന വസ്ത്രം ചിത്രത്തിനുള്ളിലായി ധരിക്കും അവൻ സ്വർണത്തിൽ നിന്നു ഭിന്നമായി ഉണ്ടോ നീലഭൂഷണത്തിൽ എന്ന പോലെ ആത്മാവിങ്കൽ നിന്നു ഭിന്നമായി ഉണ്ടോ ശരീരമൊന്നിക ജ്ഞാനഹീന ശരീരത്തെ ആത്മാവായി നീനച്ചിടും തന്നെ അറിഞ്ഞ ജ്ഞാനിയോഗ തന്നെ ആത്മാവായി തന്നെ കണ്ടിടുന്ന പരമാർത്ഥം ഇതുവിധം ധരിച്ചു കൊള്ളുക ഏകാത്മാവിൻ തത്വമിത് എന്നുണർത്തി അൻപരുടെ ഏകാത്മാഭാവ ബന്ധത്തെ ചിതറിപ്പിച്ച് ഏകാത്മജ്ഞാന സ്വരൂപനായ ഗുരു രമണൻ ചൊന്നതാകും ഈ ഏകാത്മ പഞ്ചകത്തിങ്കൽ ചൊന്നതാകും ഈ ഏകാത്മ പഞ്ചകത്തിങ്കൽ ചൊന്നതാകും ഈ ഏകാത്മ പഞ്ചകത്തിങ്കൽ
Next, we will have a reading by some of our youngest devotees, Kavin, Shiva, and Harish. They will read the chapter Bhagavan Satsang from the book Bhagavan Ramana, the friend of all.
Bhagavan Satsang. Sri T.R.A. Narayana relates how he witnessed quite by chance Bhagavan Satsang with some animals and how deeply this encounter impressed him. The year was 1948. I was then in my 39th year. I live in Madras with my wife and 4 children. I was the branch manager of a large British firm, and being in happy circumstances, I did not find the need for any religious practices or spiritual inquiries. I was content with enjoying the good things in life. I was on tour of small towns with one of the inspectors under me, Sri Parthasarathi. It was a hot April day. As Sri Parthasarathi and I were boarding the train at Vilupuram to go to Tiruvannamalai, we noticed a young man of about 25 trying to enter the first class compartment by the next door. The man was so fat that he heaved his bulky body this way and that, while another man in the platform, obviously a servant, pushed him in through the door. He was also ashamed of the curious way the people got on the platform, including Sri Parthasarathi and myself watched his predicament. He got in somehow and occupied the cubicle next to ours. When the train had run for some minutes, the man came to our cabin, introduced himself as Ratilal Premachand Shah, and started talking. Sri Ratilal, a Saurashtra Vaishya, the only son of his father, a rich merchant of the place, was born and brought up in Gundal. He had married 6 years ago. Cursed with so much fat in his body from his 10th year, now at 25, he was a huge mass of flesh and misery. How he wished to get rid of his fat and be a man. In the last week of March, Sri Ratilal had a vision while he was asleep at night. He was ecstatic, smiling and beckoning him. The smile and beckoning persisted for a long time and stood clearly before Sri Ratilal's mental eye when he awoke. He did not speak to anyone about the vision. 2 days later, his wife was reading a Gujarati magazine. Looking over her shoulders, he saw the picture of aesthetic he had seen in his vision. He came to know that the aesthetic was Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. He at once went to his father and arranged for his journey to Tiruvannamalai with a trusted family servant. All he knew about Bhagavan was what the Gujarati magazine had said, but he felt sure that his suffering would end as soon as he reached Bhagavan. The smile and beckoning of his vision of Bhagavan had given him that firm faith. Sri Parthasarathi had seen Bhagavan many times before and also had read a good deal about him. He and Sri Ratilal talked about Bhagavan during the entire 2-hour journey. I was apparently reading an English novel but heard their conversation with interest and attention. At Tiruvannamalai station, a local merchant with whom his father had arranged for his stay received Sri Ratilal. Sri Parthasarathi and I proceeded to the traveller's bungalow.
It was 4 when we had our bath and the tiffin. Sri Parthasarathi knew that I was very businesslike and would not waste a single minute. He said we could visit the market. I said, "No, Parthasarathi, we shall go and have a darshan of Maharshi first. Then, if time permits, we shall go to the temple. Let business wait." He was very surprised at my reply. It was about 5 when Sri Parthasarathi and I entered the ashram. Going round Bhagavan's mother's samadhi, we came to veranda by its side. About 50 people were sitting there. Sri Ratilal, his host, and his servant included. Bhagavan was not on his couch as usual. The visitors talked in whispers, trying to find out where he was. After waiting for some 10 minutes and finding that Bhagavan had not come to his seat, Sri Parthasarathi suggested to me that we could go in the meantime, go around and see Goshala and other places. Finishing our inspection, we were returning to the veranda by another side when we heard a childish voice say, "Chi asate, fie, you creature." We could see no children around and therefore peeped to find out the source of the voice. We observed movement among the leaves of the brinjal, lady's finger, and other plants in the kitchen garden near the veranda. Looking more intently, we saw a small goat, a little monkey, and a squirrel, and Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. Bhagavan was sitting on his haunches with his leg folded up to his breast. The goat nestled between his knees. The monkey had its head resting on his knee. The squirrel was perched on his left knee, holding a paper packet in his left palm. Bhagavan picked groundnuts from it with his right hand, fingers one by one, and fed the goat, the monkey and the squirrel, and himself by turns. His remarks appeared to have been addressed to the monkey, which had tried to snatch the nut he was going to place between the squirrel's lips. As we watched, the four companions went on enjoying the eating. All four seemed to be equally happy. The way they looked at one another and keeping close together was touching. The goat, the monkey, the squirrel, and Bhagavan had obviously forgotten their differences. And we too, looking on, saw all the four only as good friends despite the differences in their forms. No words could describe the feelings that passed through my being at the sight. The vision of transcendent appeared as a flash of lightning and revealed to me the essence of being, awareness of bliss. Sat Chit Ananda. The nuts were over. Bhagavan threw the paper away and said, Bongoda, go away, you fellows, just as any old man would speak to his grandchildren. The goat, the monkey, and the squirrel left. Bhagavan made to get up. Sri Parthasarathi and I hurried away, feeling guilty of trespassing into the divine, but not sorry. Soon after, Sri Parthasarathi and I had resumed our seats in the veranda. Bhagavan came to his couch. I cannot say he looked at us. He stood facing us, his eyes fixed on something far above and beyond anything on earth. They were like screens which shut the material world off from the light which was burning behind them. Sparks of light shot out through the fibers of the screen at times. Sparks which cooled the eyes which they fell, pierced the grass coverings, and lighted the wick inside them.
Bhagavan reclined on the pillows in the couch, supporting his head on his left palm. We all sat down to look at his face. We sat and looked around. No one spoke or made any noise, but the confrontation was not a dead silence. It was a very life experience in which the innermost being of each one of us communed with the supreme consciousness, which was Bhagavan. I was numb with the appalling realization that the glory was the same that dwelt in the simplicity which a few minutes ago I had seen eating groundnuts in the intimate company of the goat, the monkeys, and the squirrel. My mind, Bhagavan breathed in perfect confidence in his love for it. How the monkey had grinned in joy, and how Bhagavan had returned the grin as both of nut. How the squirrel had peered with its pinhead eyes into Bhagavan's dream-belated ones, and scratched his nose terribly with its tiny left paw. The vision of the Supreme Spirit underlying and overlaying the sun's perception was despised with the lovely sight of the groundnut party in the kitchen garden.
Bhagavan got up from the couch. We got up. It seemed tacitly understood that we were to leave. We left. I felt a hitherto unknown peace and joy inside me. The faces of others also showed a similar condition. I saw Sri Ratilal, his host, and a servant get into their bulla cart at the ashram gate. There was a new spring in Sri Ratilal's movements. Bhagavan's promise and the lad's vision appeared to be starting a fulfillment. Many things have happened since that day in my life. My material circumstances underwent changes for the worse. But my inner life has always been happy since that day, for I very often got a vision of Bhagavan, particularly when I was most oppressed in spirit. In 1953, I was in Rajkot staying alone in the lodge. One day, while in the dining hall, a man of about 30 accosted me. "Don't you recognize me, sir?" "No, I'm sorry," I replied truthfully. The man continued, "I am Ratilal of Gundal, sir. You remember the darshan of Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi 5 years ago?" I looked at the man again. He was thin and wiry, his face aglow with health and happiness. I shook his hands heartily. He spoke again. "Sir, Bhagavan has fulfilled his promise wonderfully well. You see me. I am now managing our family business, my father taking complete rest. I have a son 2 years old and expect my wife to give me another child in a month or two." My mind immediately went back to the goat, the monkey, and the squirrel, and Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. I could never think of Bhagavan alone. So it has been all these years. The scene comes to my mind's eye often. The kitchen party with the 4 friends at the groundnut party. And I thank Sri Ratilal and Sri Parthasarathi for guiding me to the vision beautiful.
Bhagavan's Mahanirvana was witnessed and felt by people near and far. On the occasion of Bhagavan's Aradhana celebrations, here are some anecdotes from them. On April 14th, 1950 evening, when devotees were massaging him and reciting Arunachala Shiva, his eyes were glowing with cheer, shedding joyous tears. On sipping spoons of warm ginger water and dissuading the doctor from resorting to give him artificial respiration, his slowed down breathing ceased at 8:47 p.m., externalizing his silence. There was no struggle or spasm, no other sign of death, only that the next breath did not come. For a few moments, people stood bewildered. The sinking continued. Henri Cartier-Bresson, photographer from France, then staying in the ashram, recorded it. It is a most astonishing experience. I was in the open space in front of my house when my friends drew my attention to the sky, where I saw a vividly luminous shooting star with a luminous tail, unlike any shooting star I had seen before, coming from the south, moving slowly across the sky, and reaching the top of Arunachala, disappearing behind it. Because of its singularity, we all guessed its import, and then raced to the ashram, only to find that our premonition has been only too sadly true. The master had passed into Mahanirvana at that very minute. Many saw this luminous body in the sky, even as far away as Bombay, and struck by its peculiar appearance and behavior, they ascribed this phenomenon to the passing of their master. To this day, the power of Sri Ramana has not diminished. Often, visitors go to the ashram have remarked, but one can feel his presence very strongly. Before Sri Ramana gave up his body, devotees went to him and begged him to remain for a while longer as they needed his help. He replied, "Go? Where can I go? I shall always be here."
The Mahaswami Paramacharya of Kanchi Kamakoti Mutt, Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swamigal, was camping in a village near Kumbakonam and had begun his Chandramaulishwara Puja for the night. He suddenly ordered the attendant to pull the screen and asked that a particular person be brought to the stage. Now, none other than the Pita of the mutt and the attendants who help him in the puja are allowed on stage. The bewildered devotee, a young man of 18 years, came up on stage and stood before the Paramacharya, who looked up at the sky and said, Siddhi Aitela, you have attained Siddhi. Looking at the devotee, he said, Parada, Bhagavan Porad, Parada. Look, can't you see? Bhagavan is departing. The young man was a staunch devotee of Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi since his childhood days, and his family was also close to the Kanchi Mahaswami.
It was around 8:30 p.m. at the Narasimhavanam in Sringeri. Sri Chandrasekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal, the Shankaracharya of Sringeri, who was himself a Jivan Mukta, suddenly started from his quarters and started walking towards a place a little away from his quarters with about 3 or 4 people. Usually, the Mahaswami never ventured out after dark. This was one of those very rare days. He suddenly stopped at a place and looked towards the sky, joined his hands in pranam, and stood for some time with his divine countenance shining in splendorous grandeur. It was 8:47 p.m., but he did not say anything to anyone and walked back quietly to his quarters.
A few days before Bhagavan was to drop the body, Chadwick went inside Bhagavan Nirvana's room and wept bitterly, saying, Bhagavan, you are leaving. There also, Bhagavan revealed that he indeed is the Guru through his reply. The prime duty of a Guru is to establish the certainty of his existence in the hearts of his disciples, and having done that, he is free to leave. He had already implanted that truth in Chadwick and the others, and that was why he was dropping the body.
All the devotees were distraught, because Bhagavan was going to drop the body. They wondered what they would do without him physically before them. Under Muruganar's leadership, they sent a mission to Bhagavan to ask him for a message. Did Bhagavan not know what they were asking for? His last words were, put the teachings into practice. It was Muruganar who elicited from Bhagavan the direct teaching of wisdom, and more importantly, Bhagavan's final message of putting the teachings into practice. Muruganar had written many verses on I am not the body. Yet when Bhagavan dropped the body, he could not contain his grief. He was inconsolable. When Muruganar visited Bhagavan's samadhi, it was an elevating sight. It would seem there was walking, but no walker, the worshipper lost in worship. I once asked him, Muruganar Swami, what is your attitude when you come and prostrate here? There is only Bhagavan, there is nothing else, he replied. For him, there was only Bhagavan, no Muruganar, no Ramanashramam, not even prostration. Bhagavan was everything. Everything else was not.
On the evening of April 14th, 1950, I went at 6:30 and stood in the queue and arranged for an orderly darshan of Bhagavan, and when I got up on the raised mound opposite to the door of the room where Bhagavan was sitting, and stood there for a while, with my sight concentrated on him, and prayed to him mentally, O Prabhu, won't you for once radiate on me your compassionate look? Bhagavan's eyes slowly began to open, and from those eyes, a mild and compassionate look came on me. That was the last time I had the great fortune of his compassionate look. At 8:47 that night, Sri Ramana, the embodiment of light and enlightenment, left his mortal coil. When the mortal body of Gurudev, who was at once my mother, father, Guru, and God, and who has protected me all these years, ceased to be the abode of that great soul, I remained still as a statue, drowned in inexpressible grief and sorrow. The writing of these letters began on November 21st, 1945, and continued uninterrupted all these days, through the grace of Bhagavan. And with the end of the avatar of Bhagavan, I am giving up the writing of these letters.
The faithful day when Bhagavan left his body, Osborne was there. It did not fill him with sorrow. Instead, it only made him plunge within. He felt Bhagavan's grace more abundantly and his support more powerfully. Some days after Bhagavan's Mahanirvana, Bhagavan appeared to him in his dream. In the dream, Osborne was in the old hall, and Bhagavan asked him to come near the couch. Osborne went and knelt before Bhagavan, and Bhagavan put his hands on Osborne's head in blessing. When Bhagavan put his hand on his head, he had a feeling that Bhagavan was asking him to write about his direct teaching. He then wrote 7 articles. They were brought out later as a book titled Ramana Arunachala. Every one of us, every seeker, should read this book. That was the beginning. Soon, a cascade of books started coming from Osborne.
Vishwanatha Swami got a rude shock when Bhagavan's health failed and he had to be operated on. This caused him deep pain. He went to Bhagavan and said, "Bhagavan, permit me to serve you day and night and to be with you." Bhagavan turned to him and said, "You have work to do." Saying this, he politely declined his request. On Bhagavan's last day, there were a few people inside his room. Outside, Bhagavan's devotees were chanting Aksharamana, the heart-melting verses composed by Bhagavan on Arunachala, the self. Bhagavan had already requested the attendants to help him sit up. The louder the chorus, Arunachala Shiva, became, the more were the tears of ecstasy that rolled down from Bhagavan's eyes. Vishwanatha Swami was witnessing the exalted spiritual splendor that was unfolding. He suddenly felt the gracious look of Bhagavan falling on him. He saw lightning flash within himself, and the core of his heart opened. He felt Bhagavan pouring grace into his heart and was overwhelmed with ecstasy. The next moment he saw Bhagavan smile and give a nod of approval, as if to say that what Vishwanatha Swami had experienced was the real state. Bhagavan had awakened spiritual realization in the son in accordance with his word to the son's father, Ramaswamy. This is how Vishwanatha Swami recounted that moment of ecstasy. Having received that grace, the climax of my own spiritual experiences in the proximity of Bhagavan took place during those last moments. As I stood in that small room, everything became shadowy, enveloped by an invisible, pure awareness, the one and only, ever-present reality. There was not the least feeling of separation from Bhagavan or the least vestige of sorrow on his physical death. Instead, there was a positive ecstasy and elation of spirit, which was nothing but the natural state of the self. When Bhagavan became very sick, at the end of the 1940s, I was sorely tempted to visit him. But I never succumbed because I knew that Bhagavan had instructed me to stay away from his presence. During the final year of Bhagavan's life, I suffered from continuous severe stomach pain. Some of the doctors who came to treat Bhagavan treated me as well, but none of them were able to relieve the pain. I was unable to eat anything except kanji or gruel, and even that in small quantities. I finally decided to pray to Bhagavan. "Please, Bhagavan," I prayed, "let me attain samadhi before you attain samadhi." At that moment, I saw the great light in the sky, the light that signified that Bhagavan had died. Many people saw this light, and most of them reported that it resembled a meteor. It appeared to me in a different form. I saw a great column of light about 20 feet high and 1.5 feet wide in the middle of the sky. While it was manifesting for a period of about 2 minutes, it was slowly descending towards the ashram. A few minutes later, a sadhu came and told me that Bhagavan had passed away. At that exact moment when he told me the news, my stomach pains vanished and never reappeared again. Bhagavan was buried the following day. I saw Swami Satyananda returning to Palakot with his whole body covered in vibhuti, or sacred ash. I tightly embraced him in an attempt to cover my body with this vibhuti. Since it had touched Bhagavan's body, I regarded it as his final prasadam. In the years that followed, I tried to remain in contact with the real Bhagavan, the Bhagavan who exists externally in the heart. Coming up next is Samana Drishti, an article in Sanskrit.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi Sarvada Mrigeshu Karunyam Atyantam Pritin Cha Darshitavan. Bhagavan Mrigan Manushyan Samanam Iva Drishtavan. Mrigeshu Vanaraha Sada Maharshau Pratipritim Darshayitva Maharshehe Hastat Aharam Swikritya Kaditavantah Shantim Anubhutavantah Cha. Bhagavan Vanaranam Bhasham Nyatavan Teshu Maitrim Darshitavan Api. Ramana Maharshehe Bhakteshu Yaihi Sa Maitri Drishta Taihi Bhaktaihi Maharshehe Jivanacharitrasya Anekanam Ghatananam Vivranam Kritam Tasu Ghatanasu Ekam Ghatanam Idanim Pashyamaha. अरुणाचल ग्रामे मार्गम उभयतः तिन्त्रिणी वृक्षाः आसन्. एकश्चित् कृषिकारः काञ्चन वृक्षान् पालितुम् अधिकारम् आङ्ग्लेयराज्यात् प्राप्तवान्. तथैव सः तेषां वृक्षाणां पालनं कृतवान्. अतः तिन्त्रिणी फलानि वृक्षाणां शाखासु अनेकानि अभवन्. परन्तु वानराः एतं व्यवहारं न ज्ञातवन्तः. ते वानराः सदा आगतवन्तः, वृक्षान् आरूढवन्तः च. ते फलानि गृहीत्वा खादितवन्तः. एकस्मिन् दिने तान् वानरान् दृष्ट्वा कृषिकारः कुपितः अभवत्. सः शिलाखण्डान् वानराणाम् उपरि क्षिप्तवान्. कश्चन वानरः शिलाखण्डेन हिंसाम् अनुभूय वृक्षात् अधः पतितवान्, मृतवान् च. वानरः मृतः अभवत् इति दृष्ट्वा अन्ये वानराः रुदितवन्तः. ते आक्रोशं कृतवन्तः. ते वानरस्य प्रेतं नीत्वा रमणमहर्षेः पुरतः आगतवन्तः. ते तेषां भाषया सर्वं महर्षिम् उक्तवन्तः, आक्षेपितवन्तः च. भगवान् वानराणां स्थितिम् अवगतवान्. सः तान् वानरान् शान्तं कर्तुं प्रयत्नं कृतवान्. परन्तु वानराः पुनः पुनः आक्रोशेन रुदितवन्तः. अन्ते भगवान् वानरान् बोधितवान्. मनुष्याः उत वानराः सर्वे एकस्मिन् दिने मृताः एव भविष्यन्ति. यः वानरं मारितवान् सः कृषिकारः अपि भविष्यत्काले कस्मिन् दिने मरणं प्राप्स्यति. अतः सर्वे शान्ताः भवन्तु इति. तत् श्रुत्वा वानराः शान्तम् अनुभूतवन्तः. ते वानरस्य शरीरं नीत्वा वनं गतवन्तः. वानरेभ्यः रमणमहर्षिणा दत्तम् उपदेशम् अन्यः कोऽपि मनुष्यः श्रुतवान्. सः मनुष्यः कृषिकारं महर्षेः वचनं सूचितवान्. कृषिकारः चिन्तितवान्, भगवान् मह्यम् एकं शापं दत्तवान्. अहं शीघ्रमेव मरणं प्राप्नोमि इति. अतः कृषिकारः भयात् अस्वस्थः अभवत्. सः व्याधिना पीडितः अभवत्. किञ्चित् दिनानन्तरं कृषिकारस्य बान्धवाः Ramana Maharshim militva namaskaram kritavantah. Te krishikarasya aparadham angikritya kshamam yachitavantah. Tasya roga nivaranartham maharshehe vibhutim api yachitavantah. Parantu Ramana Maharshihi kasmai vibhutim na dattavan iti sarve jnatavantah. अहं कीदृशं शापं कस्मै न दत्तवान् कृपया विश्वासं कुर्वन्तु इति महर्षिः पुनः पुनः उक्तवान् परन्तु ते विभूतेः याचनं न त्यक्तवन्तः। अन्ते भगवान् रमणमहर्षिः पाकशालात् अनिलचुल्याः भस्मं स्वीकृत्य कृषिकारस्य बान्धवेभ्यः दत्तवान्। ते महर्षिं नमस्कृत्य सन्तोषेण गतवन्तः। कृषिकारः भस्मं प्रतिदिनं धृत्वा आरोग्यम् अनुप्राप्तवान्। भगवान् रमणमहर्षिः मनुष्याणाम् उत वानराणां कर्मबन्धनस्य जीवनस्य परिवर्तनं न करोति, परन्तु सर्वेषां हृदयपरिवर्तनम् एव करोति। सः सर्वेषु एकम् आत्मानम् एव दृष्टवान् आचरितवान् च। येन समाना दृष्टिः धृता तेन महर्षिणा शापम् अथवा वरं कथं दातुं शक्यते इति एतस्याः कथायाः द्वारेण स्पष्टम्। धन्यवादः।
Our penultimate item is a kriti written and rendered by one of the Bay Area devotees, Sri Prasad Saripalli.
ఇంకను ఏమి వెతికేవు ఇంకను ఏమి వెతికేవు శ్రీ వెంకటముని పాదమరసియును వెర్రివై ఇంకను ఏమి వెతికేవు శ్రీ వెంకటముని పాదమరసియును వెర్రివై ఇంకను ఏమి వెతికేవు శ్రీ వెంకటముని పాదమరసియును వెర్రివై ఇంకను ఏమి వెతికేవు. పంకమందే పంకమందే పద్మమున్నట్టు ఇందే పంకమందే పద్మమున్నట్టు ఇంద నిశంకా శంకరము పదము నీ ముందే పద్మముదే పద్మమునయటు ఇంద నిశంకా శంకరము పదము నీ ముందే పంకముదే పద్మములటు ఇందే నిశంకా శంకరము పదము ఇంకా నింకను ఏమి వెతికేవు పంకమదే పద్మమునటు యుదే నిశంకా శంకరము పదము నీ ముదే నిరస నిదపమా సమపద పని దస నిద నీ సమ సమస నిద దపమస సమపస నిద పద పద నీ మమ సమస నిద సస పప మమ నిద దస నిద పస నిద పమ ని సమమ నిద పద పద పమ సమం మమ పప పద దస నిద సమమ పమ పద పని దస పని దమ అంతరంగమునాడు బొమ్మలనెంత కాలము తగిలి భ్రమసి అంతరంగమునాడు బొమ్మలనెంత కాలము తగిలి భ్రమసి అంక పొంకములంట కను నికళంక పదముల నీగియుండకన్ ఇంకా ఇంకను ఏమి వెతికేవు వెర్రి వై శ్రీ వెంకటముని పాదమరసియును ఇంకా నింకను ఏమి వెతికేవు శ్రీ వెంకటముని పాదమరసియును వెర్రి వై నింకను ఏమి వెతికేవు అంతరంగమునాడు బొమ్మలనెంత కాలము తగిలి భ్రమసి అంక పొంకములంట కను నికళంక పదమునని ఈ ఉండగని నిరస నిద పమ సమపద పని దశ నిద నీ సమ సమస నిద పమ సమప సనిద పద పద నీ మమ సమస నిద సస పాప మమ నిద దస నిద పస నిద పమ ని సమమ నిద పద పద పమ సమం మమ పప పద దశ నిద సమమ పమ పద పని దశ పరిదమా ఇంకా నింకను ఏమి వెతికేవు.
As our last item, we present a Tirupugar on Bhagavan written by Sri Satya Narayanan.
புறவுலகின் ஈர்ப்பயனில் பொதியாதே புலனை நின் போக்கில் மனம் பதியாதே புறவுலகின் ஈர்ப்பயனில் பொதியாதே புலனைந்தின் போக்கில் மனம் பதியாதே சிறுவனை அருணாச்சலமெனும் பதத்தாலே சிறையிட்டு ஆட்கொள்வகை அருள்வாயே சிறுவனை அருணாச்சலமெனும் பதத்தாலே சிறையிட்டு ஆட்கொள்வகை அருள்வாயே துழவு வழி காட்டியழை தன்னை தோனே துரிய மதில் தோய்த்திருக்க பணி தோனே துழவு வழி காட்டியழை தன்னை தோனே துரிய மதில் தோய்த்திருக்க பணி தோனே உறைவில் கரையேற்றும் பதம் தருவாயே குரு ரமணன் ஏத்தும் சிவ பெருமானே சிறுவனை அருணாச்சலமெனும் பதத்தாலே சிறையிட்டு ஆட்கொள்வகை அருள்வாயே குறைவில் கரையேற்றும் பதம் தருவாயே குரு ரமணன் ஏத்தும் சிவ பெருமானே.
Thank you all, and over to Los Angeles.